I achieved $100 million net worth by the age of 28, and I currently run a $500 million portfolio. And in this video today, I want to share with you a decade of business advice that allowed me to achieve those things. Hot take: if you are catching up Monday morning from the weekend, you are already behind. The top CEOs prepare before the week. If you are trying to prepare when you are in a mode of execution, you're already behind the ball. How do you expect to make millions of dollars if you haven't mastered using a calendar? The people who get ahead in life, they don't wait for life to happen to them. They plan for how every moment of every day is going to go because they want to make sure they get the most out of every day because they know how valuable their time is. I had a portfolio CEO. He came to me and he was like, "Layla, I am drowning. I feel like I have fires coming at me every day and I don't know what to do." And I said, the first thing I need to do if I want to be able to help you is I got to look at your time. Where is this person putting their time? Because where your attention goes is where your business is going to grow. He did what I call a time study, basically documents what he does with every hour of his day. And when I looked at it, I was like, no wonder you feel like shit because you're constantly using Mondays to catch up from the weekend. What he was doing was that he had no time spent planning. So he was constantly running the company on reactive mode. If you don't know how to manage your time, then you can't manage yourself. And if you can't manage yourself, you certainly can't manage a company. I mean, it sounds simple enough, but like a lot of people don't do it. I get this. When I first started, I remember this distinct moment when I was sitting on my couch and I just had this overwhelming feeling of not wanting to do what was on my calendar. What I recognized in that moment was that if I don't have somebody else telling me what to do, I need to be able to rely on myself to tell me what to do. And so if you wait until Monday morning, what you're doing is two things. One, you eat into execution time. Monday is a day to execute. It's not a day to plan. Monday is when everything hits your desk. It's not a time to sit back and say, I need to forecast what's going to happen for the week. The second piece is that you're in reactive mode. If you take 2 to 3 hours to plan your week on a Sunday and you plan out every meeting, then when you go into the week, what you do is you create all of this buffer time. It's all the time that you can use pulling the future into the present to get ahead. You have extra time in your days to focus on doing more than you thought you ever could. We don't rise to our level of expectations. We actually rise to our level of preparation. If you don't prepare for your week, then you're not going to do the things you expected to do, you're gonna do the things you prepared to do. If you're anything like me, I was not naturally gifted with anything. Preparation can make even a fool look like a genius. Some of the most successful people that I've known is that they don't have the advantage of being the smartest person in the room or the most talented person in the room, but they do have the advantage of working their fucking ass off. Leaders who lack certainty create followers who lack commitment. When I was running my first business, I was so fearful of making people feel like I was stepping on them that I actually wasn't showing up certain enough for my team. And it actually wasn't apparent to me until a friend of mine who worked for me, who I was actually grooming to be the COO of Gym Launch, gave me some feedback on a one-on-one. I asked, do you have any feedback for me? And she said, sometimes I really just want you to tell me what to do. I've tried everything and I've thought everything through and I actually just don't know what to do. And so when I'm asking you, it's because I want you to tell me what to do. And I remember in that moment, I was like, shit, I've had so much fear of overstepping that I've actually swung the opposite direction where I have not instilled enough certainty in my team. And that's when I realized that there's being stubborn and then there's being insecure. And I was leaning to the side of being insecure. And so for me, that was really learning how to lean more into a more confident and certain version of myself, because what I recognize is that when leaders are indecisive or unclear about their vision, it creates this lack of reliability within their teams and a ripple effect, not even from their team, but to all the other teams there. And I'm not certain and I'm not confident in myself and how I present our business plan and our vision to the team, then think of all the cracks that it creates along the way. Certainty creates clarity. Clarity creates speed. Speed creates progress. Progress creates momentum, and momentum leads to success. And it all starts with showing up certain about the clear vision you have. When people come in and they feel uncertain, always, guess what? It points back to one person, which is the leader. Now, end of the day, that person is me. So if I have leaders who show up uncertain for their teams, what it tells me is that I'm not showing up certain enough for them. Now, on the other side, I've had leaders that I've worked with who sway on the side of stubbornness. So actually, I had a portfolio company. We actually do not have in the portfolio anymore. The main reason for that was The leader was so stubborn about the vision. What happened was that she was very set in her ways of how she wanted to run the company, but she wanted to run it 5 steps in this direction, then 5 steps in this direction, then 5 steps in this direction. I had people from this person's team coming to me constantly. They were telling me how stressed they felt. And they asked me, as somebody who owned part of the company, do I need to be looking for another job? Because yesterday we were gonna become this kind of company, this week we're becoming this kind of company, and it feels like we're changing direction every other week. And so it was 2 things that compounded upon each other, which is being stubborn and not open to feedback, and then being so certain when they showed up, but certain in a different direction every other day. And especially with people who are newer to business, this is really common. You're constantly looking at a way that somebody's doing business and saying, oh my gosh, that way would be easier than what I'm doing today. If you just committed to what you did now and stuck with it, that would be easier than changing the path 6 times. Either side of the equation, if you go too far, whether you're super insecure or you're super stubborn about your direction, the uncertainty that either you create or you exemplify is contagious. And so what both of these situations do is they create all these cracks in the confidence that people on your team have about you and about the vision that you have. And so what happens is that those people are no longer committed. Because the moment that they feel like they can't trust the leader and they can't trust the direction of the company, they start looking and wondering where else they can go, where they can find that security. What usually leads to that is overwhelm. Overwhelm comes from high demand with low clarity. And so if you're giving people a lot of work and they have no idea where that work is going, they're gonna feel overwhelmed. Half the time, it's not even that there's so much work. It's that there's so much work with a lack of vision. And the last thing I'll say is this: we can show up with certainty without having certainty. You don't create certainty by controlling the world. You create certainty by how you react to what the world does. There are so many things that happen in business you can't control, but you create certainty by how you react to it. And I can tell you the biggest lesson when I learned this for myself was how I reacted to COVID. COVID was the most uncertain time I've ever had to navigate in business, because not only did it change the entire economy, but it shut down every business that I worked with. And so I had a team of 100 people look at me and say, do I have a job tomorrow? I couldn't tell them that they for sure had a job in 3 months, but I could show up with certainty and confidence that I was gonna do my damn best to make sure that they did. And I could convey that confidence to them. And I could let them borrow my sense of certainty until they had one for themselves. This is the best trait that you can have if you're managing people. By setting clear expectations and acting consistently, leaders can build trust, which drives better results. The speed at which you make decisions sets the speed of the business. Long time ago, back in like 2016, I joined all these different business groups. When I first showed up at these events, I was like, oh my gosh, my business sucks. I bet all these people are way smarter than me. I feel like I don't even belong in this room. When I came back for the second event, and I remember watching people who were members of these groups go up, and the problems that they shared from a year ago were the same problems that they were sharing now. So many people wouldn't grow their businesses because they wouldn't make decisions. What happens is that if you don't make the hard decisions, you get stuck in that phase of business. Because your business doesn't grow by accident, it grows by intentionally seeking out the hard decisions and tackling them head on. Making decisions creates clarity, but it starts with making decisions because you can't get clear on what path you take until you decide which path it is. Your business isn't growing because you won't make decisions. First time I ever got into business, I had a mentor that said something to me. Every unmade decision is an attention suck. And so if you look at your attention like a jar of marbles, you only have so many marbles in the jar. And every unmade decision steals your marbles. If I have an unmade decision over here, an unmade decision over here, all of my marbles are not within my jar. It means I have a lot of attention. And then wherever I direct that attention, it's gonna grow something. What that told me was like, every time I have a decision to make, I need to figure out how do I get all the information to make the decision? How do I get all the perspectives to make the decision? And how do I gather all of that as quickly as possible? Because I know that with each decision unlocks a new level of growth for me and for my company. There's really 2 types of people that I see. There's people who make decisions by aggression and people who make decisions by omission. If you're watching this and you're like, well, Layla, I have this decision I've been avoiding. You're not avoiding it. You are making it. You're just not actively making it. You're waiting until it's made for you. And so the decision will be made, and it's probably not gonna be made in your favor. Either way, a decision will be made, and the cost of change and the pain of change will be incurred. It's just a matter of, is it gonna get you the result you want or not? In other words, you're either uncomfortable remaining the same in this state of indecision, or you're uncomfortable changing, going through the process of pursuing something new and unknown. Both paths are painful, but only one leads to an outcome that you want. Is the pain bringing you closer to a life and to a business that you want, or further? So the way that I've always looked at it is, if I do nothing, this decision's gonna be made for me, then I might as well do something and have it work in my favor. Because I'm either gonna feel pain now, making the decision by aggression, or I'm gonna feel pain later, waiting for the decision to be made, and then feeling pain later when I don't get what I want. Stop being scared of making the wrong decision. Successful people and unsuccessful people make no less wrong decisions. They just respond to them differently. So rather than putting so much pressure on making the right decision to avoid a mistake, put all the effort on, if I make a mistake, how am I going to handle it? Like, if we're being really honest right now, it's just us here, like, you have something that you've been putting off. It's probably either really small or it could be really big. But like, you can only lie to yourself so long. There is no wrong way to do things. There are only trade-offs. One of the most frequent questions that I get asked is, do I go here or do I go there? This all stems from a fallacy that one path is better than the other. But the reality is that they're just different. The first time that I had to make a decision like this, which was gym launch, we'd grown it from doing nothing to like 50 million a year in 4 years. And we were at this point in the road where we said, how do we expand the business? We talked about building this other arm of the business. And I remember speaking with a mentor of mine, and she said, there's no wrong decisions. There's just trade-offs to the one that you make. So if you build a software business, that's really different from what you do today. It's gonna come with a new set of problems, which is you're gonna have to learn how to build software. Now on the other side, we talked about what if we took Gym Launch and we translated it into different languages? So she's like, okay, well, it might not be as valuable as software. So in the long run, it might not have as much enterprise value as software. However, it is a lot more of doing more of what you're already doing, but learning how to do it in a different language. And so either path presents challenges, which one takes you to where you want to go, and which one has problems you wish to deal with. A saying that I always tell myself, which is pick your problems, not your solutions. It's not that any one path is better, it's that they're all different. And so instead of pursuing what solution do I want, I ask myself, what problems do I want to live with every day? I saw the gold at the end of the rainbow. I was like, software for sure. That sounds amazing. I knew that it was the bilingual, would be easier for me. It would have more problems that I was more equipped to deal with. But I was like, oh my gosh, but if we did software, the business could get valued at like 10 times what it's valued at now. And so I said, let's pursue that. And what I learned is that if you select for the outcome and not the process, you often make the wrong decision. And so when you're making these decisions of trade-offs in the business, we're constantly blinded by the payoff at the end of the rainbow, not by all the shit that's gonna happen up until the end. Business is about learning how to stay in the game. And so if you have consistent problems that you hate dealing with, you are unlikely to even get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And that's what happened to me. There is no right or wrong path in general. You're trading your current problems for different problems in the future. The reason I wasn't willing to stay in the game and I wanted to sell that company was because they weren't problems I wanted to deal with every day. I think one of the most common questions I get is, I have a service business and I want to see if I franchise it or do corporate owned. And the same frame that I use is the same frame I give people, which is, what business do you want to be in? What problems do you want to solve on a daily basis? Say you have a chain of brick and mortar locations and you're saying, do I franchise or do I have corporate owned? Well, what's more important to you? How much do you care about culture? If you're a die-hard for culture and that is the driving force of your success, maybe you want to do corporate owned. Whereas if you're like, fuck it, and I just want to go as fast as possible and I'm not big on quality, maybe you want to franchise. At the end of the day, there's nobody that's going to be able to give you the silver bullet answer, because guess what? They probably don't fucking know you better than you know yourself. Beginners get stuck because they believe that there's a silver bullet answer to all their questions about what to do with their business. And the reality is, it's like 100 golden BBs and 100 decisions you have to make to figure out what's right for you. Beginners are paralyzed to make a decision in the beginning because they assume the real world and business works like school and only has one right answer. And in reality, there are so many right answers with only one wrong answer, which is do nothing. We always are trading what we have for something we believe we want. We just have to make sure that once you get what you thought you wanted, you don't want back what you gave to have it. End of the day, we don't eliminate problems. We trade worse ones for better ones. Small problems unattended to become big problems. The first time that this became real for me was back in 2018. We had just built our first business and it had gone from 0 to 17 million in like a year. Basically, our business was built on teaching gym owners how to run their gyms. Part of that was how to acquire customers. And something that we were really good at that time was how to use social media to acquire customers for gyms. It was something that other people had not cracked yet. When we first started, it was like you could get 50-cent leads. Then it went to like $1, then $2. And what was happening was like slowly people in our community were starting to get annoyed. The thing is that there's only so much that we could do because the cost of advertising on all platforms always goes one way, which is up. And what happened was about a year and a half after this problem started, I remember I logged into our Facebook group one day and I saw this thread just talking mad shit about us. This small nagging problem. I just continued to shove in the back of the closet or like under the rug. What happened is it had like hair had like come and like attached itself to the problem and like mold and like dirt and like all of a sudden this like little dust bunny became this like disgusting little raccoon hiding under my couch. And the raccoon came out and it was like, I hate you and you suck. All these people in our community, they were upset. They were talking about how they felt like we weren't doing anything about the problem. Even though the problem was one that I didn't have direct control over, what I realized in that moment was that I did have direct control over communicating about it. I could have explained and educated my customers on what was happening and all the things that I knew that made it obvious to me why it was happening that they didn't know. They didn't know that across all industries, costs were actually rising much faster than they were to them. And so what happened was I let a small problem get big because I didn't address it. Any major issue starts as a minor issue. So if you don't address the small problems, they turn into big ones. Anytime I feel something's off, I address it right then. So something that I ask myself a lot is I say, what small nagging issues have I avoided most days, but especially by Friday? Because what I want to do is I want to go into the weekend having cleared my plate of all small problems. You know, there was a portfolio CEO that had this happen. I noticed that he was over sales and marketing, and he'd been doing that for about a year. At first, everything was great. But here's the thing about business, is that what we did 6 months ago is what we see the results of today. What happened was about 6 months from then, all of a sudden, sales start dropping. All of a sudden, leads start dropping. Why? I know exactly what it is that 6 months ago, he started paying attention to this new thing. And then these small little cracks, all these little things that start happening because his attention was split, then amounted into big things. And so when we looked, the team had been working at like 100% capacity. And 6 months later, the team was working at like 55% capacity. That means because he put his eye on something else, all of a sudden the team felt like, well, he's not paying attention to us. We're not gonna pay attention to the job. It created this big problem. We had this huge cultural shift that we needed to make. What he learned from that situation was that it's much easier to address those things when they're small. But it's like it always pays off to solve a problem earlier rather than later. So if you're watching this right now, ask yourself this question. What am I avoiding? What am I ignoring that's getting worse, not better? The better you get, the bigger your customers will demand you become. Quality creates demand, and demand creates growth. I did not understand this concept in my first years in business. I thought that in order to get bigger, you needed to push as hard as possible to force yourself into the marketplace. But there's a point at which you want people to pull you into the marketplace. When we had Gym Launch and we were first starting off, there was about a year and a half where 45% of our business came from word of mouth. And I thought it was like the best thing that could have ever happened. At one point in time, I remember getting on a meeting and someone pointed out our referrals dropped from 45% of our sales. They were about 30% of our sales. Rather than saying, how do we get back to 45%? We said, great, let's run more ads, let's start email, let's do SEO, let's do all these things. And what happened was that number went from 45 to 30 to 20. And our satisfaction went from like 90% to 80 to 70, and it also started to drop. And then what I was noticing is that all these people coming in who weren't referrals, they cost more money to get, and they weren't as good and didn't stay as long on the back end. About a year into doing this, thinking to myself, gosh, what did I do wrong? I then found this quote that really stuck with me, which is you have to get better and let your customers demand you get bigger. And I looked and I recognized, I was like, we have not gotten better. We basically band-aided a wound that needed to be sewn shut. And what we didn't do was fix the quality. And instead, we just tried to continue pushing ourselves into the marketplace And the biggest lesson I learned is that if you create something that is good enough, people will demand you expand your business. And I learned this for acquisition.com. What I wanted is to create a business that was supply constrained, not demand constrained. Meaning we have so much demand that we can't even fulfill it. The constraint is, how do I build a business fast enough to meet the demand of the market? Doing that is a far easier way to do business than the opposite. Because if people really, they're banging at your doors wanting what you have, it makes everything easier. And being able to measure that and say, great, here's what our customer satisfaction scores are. Here's our NPS scores. Here's our portfolio performance. That is the North Star metric, not how many leads we get, not how many sales we convert. If you want to get better in order to get bigger, look at what you're measuring. And that is one of the foremost things that I have changed, is that when I was running my first business, I constantly was looking at measuring incoming sales, inbound leads, sales conversions. Now, my North Star metric, NPS score, customer satisfaction, and employee satisfaction. Those are leading indicators of marketing efficiency, sales efficiency, lead generation, demand generation. If I build an amazing product and people tell their friends about it, and I build an amazing culture and people want to work here, all the rest of things fall into place. Now, how do you know when you are forcing your business to get bigger rather than letting customers demand to get bigger? Oftentimes, the biggest indicator is this: everything feels fucking hard. Marketing is hard. Sales is hard. Customer success is hard. Everything is hard. Because when you are forcing something to grow that is not meant to grow, it is that much harder. Growth can be a double-edged sword. Because what you're doing is that as you're growing, you have to continue expanding the operations of your company to meet the expectations of your customer. And if you let one get too far ahead of each other, then you're out of lockstep. That success comes with the responsibility of maintaining and enhancing the quality of the product or service you offer. Because if you don't continue to grow in the quality of what you're offering, then you cannot keep up with the demand the marketplace puts upon you. Worry about being better, and bigger will take care of itself. Most teammates are teachable, but most leaders are not great teachers. Want to become a better leader? Become a great teacher. Just to clarify, yelling at people is not leadership. It is what unskilled and lazy people resort to when they don't know what else to do. Back when I was 20 years old and I got one of my first jobs out of college at a gym, I finally learned what a great leader does. I came into an organization, it was a big Globo gym, and I didn't know how to do anything. And so when I came in, I felt scared, but I was also so eager to learn. Like, all I wanted to do is I was like, just point me in the right direction and I'll fucking do it. And I was really lucky because I got a really fantastic boss, because that person taught me how to sell. I'd never sold before. And I look back and I think about that person and I think about how great of a leader that person was. And one thing that they did consistently was, besides all the time they put into training, on top of that, had an hour every week that person met with me, and they called it mentorship session. I got to just ask all the questions that I had in that hour to gain learning and understanding for anything that I didn't know. And I look back and I think about how that was one of the greatest experiences I could have had, because what I learned is that being a leader is not about telling people what to do, it's about teaching them what to do. Most people come in excited, willing, and hungry to learn new skills. But most leaders and managers are not there able to reciprocate what they want. They hire people and think, even though they haven't had this job before, they should know what to do. I shouldn't have to teach them. Or they think that spending 1 hour is enough time to teach somebody a brand new skill. The same amount of time it takes you to learn something, it's going to take your team to learn it. So think about how long it's taken you as somebody in business to learn how to market to a customer, how to sell a customer, how to retain a customer, and you're still learning. And then think about all the people on your team. How much time do they need to learn their craft? Most leaders miss out on great people because they're not patient enough. Great teachers seize every opportunity to teach well. Once I understood this, I look at every meeting, every one-on-one, every interaction with my team. What am I going to teach them right now? Anytime I see a teammate do something that is not aligned with how I envision their department, I don't look at it as a chance to scold them or a chance to yell at them, but a chance to teach them. An example is that the other day I was talking to one of my teammates, and he is looking at transitioning one of our teammates into a different role that would be more fitting for her. And so he came to me, he said, this is the script I have written, so it's positioned in a way that is positive, not negative. So he said, this is the script I've written, what do you think about this? And as I read the script, great job writing the script, I actually would do it like this instead. And as I told him how I would do it, then what we did is we wrote the script right there. And then on that call, he said his biggest takeaway was that I positioned the change as a positive rather than a negative. And so it wasn't that he did something wrong and I needed to yell at him, it was that I needed to teach him. And so it's making this mental switch of when you see someone make a mistake, rather than scolding them, rather than putting them on a performance improvement plan. It's like, oh, now I know where I need to teach you. If you learn all these things that I now see are gaps, how unstoppable are you going to be? What the best teachers know, where the student wants to go. And if I know what they want to be, then it also helps me figure out what are the gaps I need to teach them to get there. Now, I can imagine you're watching this and you're like, that sounds like a lot of fucking work. And I'm like, yes, this is what we do all day. We fucking teach people and we repeat ourselves over and over and over and over again. The amount of times that I've had to teach a leader to make change in their team without disrupting the team, 75 times. If you want to be a great leader, you become a great teacher. But to become a great teacher requires patience. And the only thing that's different between me and maybe you watching this thinking, how the fuck do you do that every day? I understand that mastery comes from doing the same thing day in and day out and finding new ways to do it and not get bored with it. Mastery comes from the boring shit. And so if you want to be an amazing leader, you have to become an amazing teacher. And the only way to get there is through repetition. There's a quote by John Wooden that I think puts it perfectly. Effective leaders are first and foremost teachers. We are in the education business. The reason that I like making videos is because guess what I get to do with those videos? Send them to my team to educate my team.